I'm delighted to welcome Russ Wyland, David. You know he's one of my favorite speakers of all time. But it's not just because he brings to us a wealth of knowledge from a perspective of federal funding agency, but also how do you write these funding opportunities? What is outreach and engagement? Why do we need to do that when we're writing grants? Do we put that into our budget? How do we talk about our research in a way that will make change? How do we inspire the next generation, the future of our field? And how important is it that we're interdisciplinary? And if it's so important, why doesn't it impact tenure? So all of these questions and more. Stump the speaker. Help me stump the speaker. It's hard to stump Russ. He knows just about everything and everybody, and all the bodies are buried. He knows where. So Russ is a humanities scholar and an advocate for the humanities, and he will make his mark. And I am so delighted that I have him in my backyard. He has moved from the frigid cold down to paradise, living in St. Pete now, and I'm hoping to recruit him to do more things. So stay tuned. I'll see if I can recruit him to do things in the fall too. Russ Wyland, please regale us with your wisdom.
Thank you, Sandy. You're too kind. Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me to today's session. It's a delight to be here again. I was here last year. I think I have kind of a vague recollection of what I talked about. This time it will be different. I'm very excited to go through my remarks today, which I think will be about 40 minutes long or so, and then ample time to ask questions. I see David already put in the chat that you can use the chat for your questions. And David, please, if you get something that's relevant to what I'm talking about in the chat and you want to stop me mid-sentence, please do. And I'm happy to there's nothing sort of sacred about my text here that it can't be stopped. So my name is Russ Wyland, and until 4 weeks ago, I was a public servant working for the National Endowment for the Humanities. I've worked there for 36 years, almost, and have done various things. And I'll talk a little bit more about myself later. I think it's really important, especially if I'm going to be a little bit unedited in places, that you understand where I'm coming from, so that when I was a public servant, I had to be sort of very careful about how I said things, and now I find, I have all this new freedom as a retiree. So I'm going to maybe be a little bit more unedited than I normally would be. I do want, before I start, to thank everyone at USF for this. Sandy, you have been such a great friend to me, but you've also just been, I think, brilliant with this summer grant writing workshop. And I know it's your brainchild, and I'm so impressed. And Ross, you've been such a great, there's always someone behind the scenes making things work. And I suspect you and David and Hawa are probably the ones making things work behind the scenes. And I am so grateful, because I know a lot of times those people don't get the thanks. And then now that I've just met her, was it Candace? Did I remember as Candace? Welcome on your first day. It's great that you're here. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see that? Does that give me a thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. So many months ago, when I agreed on this title, um, when I agreed to do this presentation, I agreed with Sandy on kind of a generic title, Research That Matters. And that's and it's still the main the main thrust of this um, presentation. Uh, so much has happened though in the last few months that I added the second part of that title of the title there. Um, so I've taken a few liberties by expanding it, given me an opportunity to reflect a little bit, and I hope sort of show where I am these days. Um, the main title, Research That Matters, is probably the part that is the most clearly associated with the grant enterprise. It reflects a value judgment that research, some research matters more than others. Research that matters, it means does that mean that some doesn't matter? I don't think so, but it means at least that some probably matters more than others. And in the grants business, where I've been for so many years, of course, we make value distinctions all the time. I honestly do believe that all research, whether it's done by one person or a team, if it's of interest to a very small subfield of the humanities or global community, is inherently important. But the grants biz is predicated on deciding which research matters most. We make this value determination on the quality of the application in front of us, not the actual research to be accomplished. So what I'm saying here is that really great projects go unfunded because simply the applications that are lacking in some way. So I have added this other little part, and what's the matter with research? It could have put, and what's the matter with Russ Wyland? But I phrased it as what's the matter with research? Because increasingly I find myself pondering this question. Why is it that something that I value so deeply, research, and I find that it has such self-evident value, why is it that it's so often met with either hostility or indifference from so many people? This is something I can't answer, and I as much as I would love to answer in this presentation, I won't. But I want you to know that in some ways, this is the question that motivates me all the time. What's the matter that research isn't embraced with the same enthusiasm that I embrace it with. So I hope all of my remarks today add up to this. With so much tumult going happening in the humanities, and I should say in all areas, now is the time to prepare ourselves and those we work with for what's coming in the future. And so my remarks are going to focus on that. So our agenda today. I'll start with spending a very little bit of time on my background. As I mentioned, I want you to know where these remarks are coming from. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the humanities ecosystem as I understand it. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk about the entire ecosystem, very complicated. But I want to give you sort of my take on a few things that are really important in the humanities ecosystem. The humanities ecosystem is a phrase that many of us use to talk about the entirety of what's happening in the humanities. And here I'm going to steal from Sandy because she said something that was so insightful the other day, which really rocked my world with its simplicity. And it was simply a triangle. And on one side of the triangle, we have grantors and advocates and sponsors. And on another part of the triangle, on another side of the triangle, we have humanities practitioners, the PIs. And then on the third part, we have humanities institutions and broadly defined. And it's that interaction among all of those things that really create kind of the humanities ecosystem. So I just wanted to credit you, Sandy. Thank you for when, as soon as you were drawing that out for me, I thought, oh my gosh, she's talking about the humanities ecosystem. So I want to give you that credit. I will warn you in advance that my reading of the humanities ecosystem is rather grim. But I will follow up with our agenda with sort of half going to the humanities ecosystem and the other half going to sort of positive actions that we can take to sort of positive actions that we can take to change the ecosystem or to improve the ecosystem. Those of you who know me well, and I don't know who's out there who might be watching, for all I know, there might be NEHers out there watching. You will know that at NEH, I was frequently referred to as Pollyanna Wyland, and not or because of my ability, which has been really lifelong, of seeing opportunities in things, seeing silver linings where others don't. Right now, the humanities ecosystem might be troubling, but I am going to spend some time today talking about positive actions that we can all take at this moment when the grant enterprise is contracting and changing. I know many of you don't work directly in the humanities out there, but I think what I have to say will be familiar to you nonetheless, and it certainly doesn't exempt you from action, as I'm going to ask you to take. My father used to say that when the farmers are doing well, everyone is doing well. The same kind of homespun logic can be applied here. When the humanities are doing well, everyone is doing well. When humanities thrive, collaborations within all disciplines are better. Students in all disciplines are better equipped, and I would argue our democracy is stronger. So on that, let's jump in. Oh, I will leave some time for Q&A. And so, of course, you can always ask as we go along. I don't mind being interrupted. So I will take just a very little bit about me. As Sandy's introduction was very generous. I thank you again, Sandy. In my mind, the most important thing about me is that, as Sandy mentioned, is that I'm both deeply invested in the grants world, and I'm also deeply invested, my own sort of passion as a researcher. And that means as a researcher, I'm also someone who is applying for grants. So I'm playing both sides of the field here. Some of you who have worked with me might have worked with me before when I was in the Division of Research programs, where I was for 15 years or so. During my time there, I conducted somewhere between 70 and 80 outreach workshops in almost every state and for almost every discipline of the humanities. I worked with researchers every day to help them put together stronger applications. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those strategies that I think work. But we can also talk about elaborations on those during Q&A. Last year, as the first director, when I was named the first director in the Office of Research by Chair Shelley Lowe, I pursued a mission to bring historically underserved audiences into the humanities and into the NEH family. Places like HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges and communities, rural and teaching institutions, two-year colleges, and contingent scholars. There are other underserved audiences, of course, but these were the big ones. And in my working with Chair Lowe, I thought these were the places where NEH could make a real positive difference. While not as obvious, I'm also on the other side, as I mentioned. I carry on my own research load and publish my own work in Victorian literature and Victorian studies. There is nothing I love more, I have to say. I'm passionate about a lot of things, but there is nothing I love more than sitting in a library or an archive, chasing that one elusive moment when I might actually have a thought that nobody has ever thought before or hasn't thought in many years. There is nothing that is exciting as that. I feel like I've only had that a couple of times in my life. And when I do, it's such a rush that I'm always brought back to research. As a researcher, though, I'm also applying for grants, and I've gotten a couple, a few. I've also been turned down a lot. And both things have helped me a lot become a better grantor, and have really given me, I think, a better insight into this everything that I'm going to talk about today. So the humanities ecosystem. I am, my background is in the humanities, and so it's almost always the case that I'm going to start with a little historical reflection. So I'm going to do that now. This year, the humanities, of course, has a complicated and storied history, and obviously I can't give you a proper history of the humanities. But I want to make one important point. There was never capitalized in my script, capitalized in my voice. There was never a time when the value of humanistic knowledge was agreed on. I think there is a feeling that, in ancient Greece and in ancient Rome, the humanities had a privileged place. And certainly, I think the people, the philosophers, the storytellers, the historians, they all, they sort of wrote the history of what we study now. So it's not surprising that we feel like that they were, that the humanities were central to them. But the fact of the matter is, humanities work always involves interpretation. And as long as there's always interpretation, there's always disagreement. And so there has always been tension surrounding the humanities. It has never been, the people have talked about a golden age. There always has been an area, a gray area, an area of contest. I think we need to sort of always kind of keep that in mind. Debates regarding subjects like music and philosophy and art and architecture have reflected the subjective nature of the humanities that often leads to greater room for disagreement compared to the sciences. We have always relitigated, reinterpreted, retold. Truth isn't settled in the humanities. And at a time right now where we like things cut and dried, and we like things that can be fit into nice sound bites, the humanities seems problematic, or it seems distant from our current values. I've included a picture here, the second picture there. The first one is Aristotle, in case you didn't know. The second one is Johannes Kepler, the scientist. In the 16th century, we saw the rise of science. And actually, the first scientists were really also great humanists. They came to embrace, though, quantitative thinking versus other kinds of thinking, qualitative thinking that was embraced by the humanities. As this evolved, as this string evolved, they very quickly chose a kind of approach to science over into the 19th century and into the 20th century that valued working collaboratively. And that's why I have that third picture there of William Wordsworth. The Romantic period, which Mr. Wordsworth was a part, and I have to say I dearly love him, firmly planted and nurtured the idea of the solitary genius in the humanities. So while the sciences are moving off and creating teams to work together, the humanities are going off and focusing on and putting the greatest value on the solitary genius. As a science advocate, as science evolved into a team enterprise, humanities evolved into a solitary one. Even today, we send our humanities graduate students into the library for 4 years and anticipate that they will emerge after that time with a fully formed dissertation. The solitary genius has been constituted anew this past year with 3,500 new humanities PhDs, all in this model. Or I should say most in this model. There are some places that are trying to break that model. And this fact is complicated by another. The humanities has rarely given more than lip service to writing that is clear and widely engaging. We learn to talk about the humanities in ways that alienate often many and lead to, and this leads to claims of elitism. I don't think humanities scholars are elitist, but I think sometimes our language suggests that we might be. I think there's other parts of the ecosystem we want to look at. And here is sort of the national public fundings, I call it the spiral, but it's if you look at history to understand the PI, your PI, if you're a research professional. So if you think about what I just talked about with the history is explaining where our applicants come from and that their milieu. let's look a little bit at the where they're coming into with grants, especially at the federal level. We need only look at the newspaper and my own experience with Doge to understand that part of the ecosystem, to understand a little bit about what's happening with the ecosystem for federal in the federal workplace. Congressional skepticism. There's been books and books written about congressional skepticism towards the humanities. It has ebbed, but this skepticism has ebbed and flowed over the years. So, not surprisingly, the money has ebbed and flowed uh, as well. In the mid-1990s, the Gingrich Revolution brought about an almost 60% cut in humanities funding. Over 20 years, we've built that back up. And now it looks like we're hoping we can keep the NEH alive. It's very important that we do for a lot of reasons. But it will probably come out with a serious cut. If it's not a cut, it will at least be a realignment of funding that moves away, likely moves away from higher ed. So it will feel like a cut, even if it's not a real cut in the budget. We are now, so what I see right now is we're kind of in we're in an ebbing motion in the humanities. The humanities is feeling at least like we've lost money. While NEH has not yet been formally slashed, it has significantly moved away from institutions of higher ed and away from researchers. And I can talk a little bit about that later if you want. Unfortunately, this is not just a humanities problems. Our colleagues at NSF, NIH, and other grant agencies are feeling a similar pinch and will likely see similar cuts when the administration, in the upcoming budget for FY26. But here is the sort of devious thing that most people haven't yet grappled with. In the humanities, NEH funds are used to support many of the private grant enterprises around the country. If NEH fellowships and summer stipends are cut and humanities researchers have fewer opportunities at NEH, then the logical thing would be to say for them that those grantees should turn to the private sector. But what would happen? NEH provides funds for places like the Newberry Library, the Huntington Library, the American Antiquarian Society, the National Humanities Center, the American Academy in Rome, the New York Public Library, and fellowship programs in China and India and other places around the world. These institutions, these private institutions, will likely still give grants. But because of the disappearance of NEH, or because NEH is diminished, they too will see their grant programs diminished. So a lot of people haven't realized this yet. It has certainly been in the news with state programs, because the state programs have been cut from 40% to 20%. So a lot of the state funding has gone away, but also a lot of this private research money has dried up simply because NEH has shuttered those programs already. The result of less funding, of course, is that fewer people apply. It's hard to convince people that if money is going away, they should put themselves out there and try to get money from a place that was already hard to get money from. So they go away. When they go away, what happens is that just proves to Congress and others that their skepticism was well-founded, and that gives them more of a reason to cut in the following year. And we get in this spiral. And this is one of the things that I really worry about, is that people will go away. They will hear that NEH is dead, and they will stop applying. And if they stop applying, that will then show everyone that NEH really isn't needed. And it will be cut and cut and cut. And finally, it will till there's nothing left to cut. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit. And suggest and talk a little bit about what I see also as a sort of a research and development spiral that's happening in institutions of higher education. I've already said something about research using about research and PIs, and talk about that using my little historical models to talk about where I think we are with applicants. I have said a little something now about the national funding spiral. I now want to turn to the one part that I will, by my own admission, know least about. But I hear from many research development professionals about the challenge faced by the humanities at their institutions. And perhaps this will sound familiar to some of you. Institutions understandably have financial goals to bring in outside money. They need that outside grant money. It's important to them. It's important to the health of the university. Research dollars not only help faculty members accomplish their research aims, but it adds to frankly, the prestige of the institution. And it keeps the bills paid through indirect costs. So with already small amounts of money going to the humanities, and if that drops even more, institutions will have to basically redeploy their research resources, namely research development professionals usually, to help researchers go after the big money. And where's the big money? Historically, that's been in the sciences. This leaves behind researchers in the humanities. Suddenly, they don't have the same kind of support that maybe their colleagues in the sciences have. The result is that fewer people in the humanities are able to do research, which means is even less of a chance of getting humanities dollars, which means if you're going to get less dollars, you're going to have to redeploy again. Fewer people apply, fewer dollars, more research money is needed. It's just it's a terrible sort of circle. And what does this all add up to? I mean, I've talked about the three sides of Sandy's triangle now, and just given a very, very, very high level sort of assessment of what's happening at each level. And what does this all add up to? And my fear is very, very simple. In the humanities ecosystem is facing a class crisis. The richest institutions that can weather the richest institutions can weather this crisis. They will get they will get a larger piece of a shrinking humanities pie. Their faculty will stay somewhat engaged in funded research. We all have these sort of gaps. Contingent faculty members versus tenure track members, poorly funded institutions versus not unfunded, well-funded institutions, rural institutions, minority institutions. These institutions will have to start to cut humanities programs, and it starts a whole different kind of spiral. So I feel like there's a growing gap. It's sort of a class gap within the humanities that this is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. But okay, so enough about that. Let's go to something happy, shall we? As grant professional and professional, we should be yeah. I hope everyone, I'm going to suggest this, I want everyone to sort of think about ways that the sort of a class system it might be developing in the humanities on your campus, because I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because I think we can address that a lot with the grant process. So some actions for optimism. I want to pivot now and put on and sort of bring forth Pollyanna Wyland to suggest that we look at 4 actions that will increase optimism. I want you to stay involved. I want all of you to take stock. I want you to educate, and I want you to challenge. And let me tell you what I mean by each of those, because I think there are great opportunities that will improve your grant your grant seeking activities. So first of all, I want you to stay involved. Fight the urge to retreat. Stay in the game. When you retreat, it appears that the humanities are weaker to those on the outside who make decisions about the resources that go to the humanities. And that's if it's at your institution or at the federal level, really at any level. One of the best things that you can do for public and private foundations alike at times like these is to show your interest in ways that matter. Step 1 in my book is to create and update your list of funders. Remembering that don't discount federal funders, even though you might have heard that they are dead, because they are. The endowment still has over $200 million to spend this fiscal year, and depending on the way that the budgeting process goes this fall, there are a lot of people saying that we're just going to end up on basically a continuing resolution next fall, and that means we'll have $200 million again. Now, I don't know how NEH is going to reallocate that money, but if they get it, they will be looking to spend it. So update your list of grant opportunities with your deadlines, with your amounts, with the lag time between submission and announcement. Keep it updated. I talked about this last year. There are some organizations that are trying to step up their humanities work right now. And so pay a particular attention to a few. Mellon, for example, is one that you should be watching. They have already devoted a significant amount of emergency funding for state humanities councils, and they are actively looking for ways to support more of the humanities research endeavor and particularly collaborative research work that humanities that have been pared down by the National Endowment for the Humanities. I would say Ford and Spencer also have indicated that they are looking for ways. They understand the situation, and they are looking for ways to assist the humanities in more meaningful ways than they have. ACLS is currently reassessing its programs. Many smaller and discipline-based organizations, like the American Philosophical Society, which I'm very high on right now, and the Research Society for Victorian Periodicals, which is one I'm very familiar with, continue to have robust grant programs for humanities research. These, of course, are smaller awards, but they are particularly important if you are working with junior scholars, where it's just important to get them up and running and forming really good grant habits. You should be looking at some of these. American Philosophical Society currently not receiving NEH money, so they have a very robust program, and it's not being funded by NEH, so they're not going to be harmed. And like I said, there are a number of discipline organizations that represent particular disciplines. So I want you to focus there. I'm going to come back to ACLS because of something I think some of you tuned in early might have heard Sandy ask about ACLS. So I'm not going to really stop right here, but I do want to talk about ACLS a little bit more because I think it's going to be the new voice, or the main voice for humanities advocacy in the coming months ahead. If you are not a PI, I want you to double down on your promotion of humanities opportunities, even if they are fewer than they were before. And I want you to get the word out. One of the things that we're seeing with NEH right now, I was the head of the Office of Outreach, and it was central to my work to get the word out about NEH opportunities. They have now shuttered that office. So even while they're giving more money, they're still giving money, they are not promoting it. So it's really puts the burden on you, unfortunately, to make sure that you get the word out about their deadlines. I mentioned that you need to apply. Good things, even though I'm very sad about the things that are happening at NEH and its programs, they still have a lot of programs for researchers, both collaborative programs and individual programs, and good things can happen. In the mid-1990s, I already mentioned when NEH was cut during the Gingrich Revolution, the then chairman Sheldon Hackney actually held the fellowship programs robust. And so they were not cut at all. But faculty members heard that NEH had been cut and they went away. In fact, about 2/3 of our applicants left. And yet we had enough money to make the same number of awards as before. So we went from 1 in 12 funding ratio to 1 in 5. So don't be too quick to go away. Encourage people to apply. That will likely mean that they will be competing in a smaller pot they will be competing for a pot of money with a reduced number of people. It will also mean that you are sending a message to Congress and other places that the institution still matters to you. So apply is a really good thing. If you can't apply or you can't find people to apply at your institution, encourage them to review, because reviewers go away just like applicants. I want you to take stock in what you have and then look to grow it. Account for your resources. What resources do you have available to you? For example, former grantees, former reviewers on your campus, get them lined up to speak or to become mentors to junior faculty and adjuncts. Now is the time to start making use of the skills that you already have with the people you already have. I want you to sit down with a nice cup of coffee somewhere and make a list of your strengths and weaknesses and gaps. Do you have, for example, do you have a medical school? Now people would, when I bring this up, they'll say, yeah, but that's not humanities, but it probably can be. Maybe this is an opportunity to create a medical humanities carve out at your institution if you have a medical school and that is one of your strengths. Do you have a humanities institute on campus? Maybe it's time you develop closer relationship with the Humanities Institute to create a mentorship program. What will you be doing? What you will be doing is creating collaborations on campus, which is important, collaborations. But those collaborations can turn into things that then can be funded. And if you think of with like the medical humanities, there are so many other additional places you can go if you are looking for money that will build on the strengths of your medical school. So think about those kinds of things. So I want you to take stock in your strengths and your weaknesses and your gaps. It is not typical in the humanities for networks or relationships. We just don't make them as easily as we should. To create further applicants, start seeding the ground with collaborations. Look across multiple campuses. If you're in, especially if you're in an urban area, you might have several campuses close by. If you know your if you don't know your grassroots practitioners in the humanities, like museums, libraries, state humanities councils, now is the time to develop those relationships. And then I say here, create CV-able moments. You have to take responsibility for helping to build the CVs of people who might be grantees, grantee material one day. So provide them opportunities for lectures, programs with local schools. These are the sorts of programs that can energize them, that can create future material for grants in the future. And it will also teach them better collaboration skills. Educate. And here, this is, I think, the main one. Don't assume that people in the humanities, no matter how eminent they are, don't assume that they know how to write an application. Full stop. Don't assume they know how to create a team, because everything in our ecosystem, or I should say nothing in our ecosystem, is pushing them in that direction. Remember, we value single, solitary researchers. We value researchers who work on their own. And we don't teach in graduate school how to write an application. So what you need to do, I think, is start with the very basics. Teach people how to talk about their projects. And this is simply getting them together and talking about their projects and helping them tease out and see new ways to look at their projects. This will always be the most important thing for humanities grantors. How do you talk about your project? What kinds of conversations does it participate in? Does it start a new conversation, or does it participate in an old conversation? Are its methods unique? A lot of times scholars simply forget that they're doing things in a different way, and that in itself might be an argument for significance if others can take that method and move it to another project. Does it unearth new research materials? Or perhaps does it use known materials differently? That can be part of the significance. What will we know about the project that we don't know now? That will be part of it. Don't be afraid of the classroom. Ask questions like, how will it benefit students? Even in research projects, students are very important. Do not shy away from them. So we might also ask, how will the general public benefit? Again, humanities research often does not think about how a larger public will embrace the research being done, but we need to do that. I always suggest my rule of 3. Ask the people who are interested in applying for grants to develop 3 ways of just explaining the significance of what they do. It's not, a lot of people come to NEH and say, it's the reason it's significant is because it's never been done before. But a lot of things have never been done before, and it doesn't mean that we should spend our money on things just because they haven't been done before. So ask the people at your institution, press them to come up with 3 different ways. What are those, again, what are those discussions that they're participating in? How are the methods replicable with other projects? How do the materials, how are you using them? All of these things that might show the significance. You see this in applications that are funded over and over. I encourage you, get funded applications from NEH or from other funders, ask for things that have been successful, and I will almost guarantee you there will be at least 3 distinct arguments for significance. In times of scarcity, work plan, work plan, work plan. If I only have a few dollars to give out, I want to know that the person I'm giving it to knows what in the hell they're doing. So it's time to focus on a work plan, focus on providing enough detail that gives a panelist, gives a reviewer confidence that you know what you're talking about. That might mean talking about the materials you're going to look at, those methods, how much time you're going to spend on any one task. And it means saying when the final product will be done. So often people say, I'm applying for a year and here's what I'm going to do. And they will then stop and never say, and here's when I hope my book comes out. And panelists with dealing with scarce funds need to know that. I want you to think about and encourage the people you work with to think about how applications connect to within each other. So how does the narrative connect to the CV? How do they reinforce each other? So if you're mentioning all of the great things you've done in your narrative, is that reflected in your resume? Or if you're mentioning things that are really important in your resume, how is that highlighted in your narrative? Every part of the application has to reinforce every other part. Panelists don't read an application as a series of standalone parts. They read them together as one argument, and therefore you have to pay attention after the application is all drafted. You have to read it all together. And am I reinforcing my good points here with good points here and good points here? You have to understand how all of the pieces work together and reinforce. And those will be, and the applicants that do that will have, I guarantee you, the strongest applications. Help people understand how to talk about themselves. People don't like to talk about themselves, or they love talking about themselves. Either way, we have to learn how to talk about ourselves and our work, about how we build on the work of others. We have to not hide our own accomplishments by submerging them somewhere in a resume. If you've done good work, you have to tell people in your narrative that you've done good work. And don't be shy about saying, I had another grant and I accomplished this, so that it gives confidence to the people who are reading your application. A lot of humanities folks simply don't know how to talk about themselves. And so that's it's really important that they know how to bring forward their good work. I want you to also to introduce yourselves to new funders. Let me tell you, people in the grants world want to talk to people who want their money. At any age, we hired hundreds of program officers and program analysts who were there primarily to talk about how to help you access our money. And it's no different with ACLS, with Mellon, with the American Philosophical Society. Any of those organizations are going to want to talk to you. So reach out to them. Even if you don't have a question, make one up. Make one up and don't be shy about reaching out. And I would say, try to call first or use email and say, I'd like to set up a phone call with you. Develop that relationship. In the competition, it might not matter if you know them or not, but by talking to them, you will get a better sense of what they're looking for. I don't want you to change your application based on what you hear, your project. I don't want to change your project, but you might talk about it differently once you understand what they're looking for. I want you to challenge, to take up the challenge. And let me just see. I want you to be that bridge between the humanities and the sciences, break cycles of skepticism and apply um, uh, and apply one more time. Stick up for the humanities and break your skepticism. And here's my request to you. Do one positive thing a month on your campus for the humanities. I am not asking you to go out and with a sign. I'm not asking you to write a letter or do anything crazy like that. Attend a humanities lecture and show support for your humanities community. Go to a science presentation and take a colleague in the humanities with you. Better yet, take someone who's an adjunct and let them know that they matter enough that you want to take them to see this presentation. Have coffee with a faculty member just to learn more about what they do. Reach out to a decision maker in your community with simply a story about how the humanities are making a difference where you live. And finally, read someone else's work. Offer to read their application, offer to read something that they're drafting. Even the work of offering to do something can do worlds. And right now, the humanities needs that kind of fundamental support, which isn't hard to give. It's just letting them know that you support what the humanities does and that you are there to help if they take that next step and apply. You are building those bridges. It's so important. I would also add one that I didn't add, and now I wish I had, but I'd written it in my notes. Think about improving your skills in AI. I know in a lot of organizations, things like ChatGPT, using ChatGPT on your applications is something that is discouraged or even forbidden. But there are lots of ways you can use AI to help you improve your work. So I want you to consider improving your AI skills so that you can better assist people who are applying. And we can talk a little bit more about that. So final thoughts. The current situation won't last. I don't think that it is sustainable, what's going on right now. And we've already seen that Doge is starting to crumble a little bit. But I think at the same time, we have to admit to ourselves, it can't go, and it probably won't go back to being the same as it was. So now is the time to start to prepare for what is coming next. That means we've got to get better at team building. We've got to write in clearer language, and we've got to practice doing that. And we've got to help people write better applications. We've got to help grantees develop arguments for significance and think about all the different possible ways that a project could be significant. I mentioned writing skills. You can fight skepticism wherever you live about the humanities, because the humanities has a great deal to offer for everyone. And finally, I want you to build your networks. That means build your networks professionally, both on your campus and professionally within your, so maybe you're working with, if you're a research development professional, you're building your networks and using those networks to improve the work of people on your campus. I am going to offer here my email. It used to be, I used to offer my NEH email. I think some of the most interesting conversations that I've had over the years have come because people a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks after the presentation, something occurs to them, or they want to bounce an idea off me. Even though I'm not at NEH anymore, and that's not my job, I'm still willing to talk to you. And so there's my email address. Feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to brainstorm with you about what's happening at your campus, what kind of projects you might have, and ways that you can improve the grants situation where you live. All right, I'm going to throw it back to David and to Ross. I see there are 13 questions, and so someone, I assume, will ask me what those are, or do I need to?
We will ask you, Russ. I have a question. Okay. Thank you so much.
Should I stop sharing at this point, do you think? Or?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your talk. Now, first, before we go, are you going to provide your slides? Can we expect to have these?
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right, absolutely. Great. And we'll post those in Canvas then next week when we post the recording of this presentation. So Susan has a question, and she would like to know, could you provide examples of 3 types of significance in a research grant application?
Yeah, so I think I sort of gestured towards those, but the review of literature is often used in a grant application, a research application, to situate where a project, what kinds of discussions are being you're entering. So talking about where you're entering a discussion, if you are entering or if you're starting a whole new discussion, talking about your methods is another great way to talk about the importance of what you do. Talking about your research materials, the way you're going to conduct your research. There's often ways that can be significant. So yeah, it's and then thinking about audiences. What audiences are you reaching? Are you reaching, is what are you going to be saying to someone who is what are you going to be saying to someone who is in your field, maybe in an adjacent field, maybe to the general public. So there are all sorts of different ways that you can use these things these are all different strategies for talking about significance.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Great. Yes, standing on the shoulder of giants, but still talking with them, even when you're on their shoulders. That's kind of an awkward vision, but okay.
So feel free to continue typing out questions, but I also want to remind you, if anyone wants to just come on camera and ask questions, you're free to do that too. Just raise your hand. Sandy, you typed a couple of questions. Do you want to ask them?
No, I like it when Dave asks them.
I'll ask them then. Okay. So at NIH, you can apply to a parent opportunity. Can humanities scholars, can they apply directly to NEH for unsolicited RFPs?
No. Simply put. Right now, NEH is in a moment where they have a whole lot of money and they're trying to get rid of it by the end of the year. And so they're finding all sorts of ways to give grants, very large grants, $1 million plus type grants, to the things that most for things that are very that are consistent with the executive orders that were issued primarily at the very beginning of the administration. And so a lot of those, and with the run up to the 250th anniversary of the US as well. And so there are all of these. So there are, and those are I think the plan is to focus on institutions, but also approaching institutions that that the administration will feel are sort of the best institutions to fund right now. That's not a very artful way of saying, but I think everyone knows what I'm what I'm getting at.
I think we do.
And you've said much more than you could normally say if you were at the
Yeah,
NEH.
I would not even
So
have
thank
been
you
able
for your
to say that.
candidness.
We're going to go back to Susan. She was the one who had a question on significance. And so you answered that part.
Hi,
But she has a
Susan.
hand up.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon.
Where
Yeah,
are you at, Susan?
I'm in Kingston, Jamaica.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so interesting, informative presentation. Thank you. When I teach research, I usually tell my students that there are two types of significance. Theoretical significance, as in adding new knowledge to the world, and practical significance, doing something that we can apply in some kind of real world setting, possibly, potentially. And when I listen to your answer, it seems to me that you're saying in your teaching, you said there's not just it's never been done before. That sounds like a subset of theoretical. And then in your second answer, I don't remember every part, but you said, for example, the audience that I would put as a subset under practical to me. And then you said methods, and I'm trying to think which part does that fit in? Like in this little simplified, and really what I thought is two questions I have now. Question one is exactly define significance for me. And then my second question is, do you like that simplistic two-tiered type of significance, or is there more types? And then third question, I wanted actual examples. What you gave me was types of significance. I wanted, like, even in humanities, an actual example, example of here is a real grant. This is the types of significance. And you're going to say, oh, I cannot look it up. Well, I don't know. I have not, apart from since I've started this grant writing workshop, and I'm actually in a grant funded project right now already. I don't know. I don't have easy access. Maybe I've always had it. I just didn't know how to have it. But I would love an actual example or two. So I can repeat if you're, but does that,
Yeah,
that's what I want to know.
Your first question again.
The first question is, define significance in the context of research grants. And then related to that is saying that there are two types of significance, theoretical and practical, sufficient, or is there another type? I start there. Am I making sense?
Thanks for that. Let me
Sure.
see what I can do. Um, yeah, I like the way you talk about significance. I think having a theoretical and a practical way to approach it is great. There are, even within those two, several different ways to break down significance.
Okay.
And so, I think if that is a way that makes sense to you and that you can convey it to people, I think you should stick with it. But even within those two things, there are several different ways. I think that the methodological significance that I talked about, the way that we do our work, I'm trying to give thinking of an example. I'm looking up here at my bookshelf. Okay. Are you familiar with Benedict Anderson?
Maybe the name,
Benedict
not in detail.
Yeah, Benedict Anderson was an anthropologist, and he wrote a book called Imagined Communities. And it was about, and he had a very particular approach to understanding communities and how we come up with communities and how we feel about ourselves as part of communities, and we put ourselves in communities. And I mean, this is an old idea now. It's probably 20 years old. At the time when it came out, though, it was revolutionary. It was a method that we had never really thought about, and never really, and so I never saw a grant application from him, but I could easily imagine how if he was writing an application, he would be talking about how his method, the way that he is using an idea, how that is going to then become applicable. And people actually picked up his idea and moved it over here and talked about it in this way. And and people used it in music to talk about ways of thinking about communities in music, and in art, and in all sorts of ways that one probably could have anticipated a fair amount of from the very beginning. So I think there are that when I talk about methods might be significance, that's what I mean. The way we're doing the project is in the way that we're doing the project, can that be replicated by someone else in some other kinds of field? That is a very powerful way of talking about why your project is important. And I think NEH always uses the word significance. That's our word that we always use in all of our grant applications. ACLS has exactly the same wording for us, except they use importance. And in some ways, I like theirs more. It's a little bit cleaner. I think it's a little bit more common sense. It's really about asking yourself, why is my project important to do? And that is, in my mind, what significance is. There's a lot of different examples that we could call up. On the internet, I think at NEH, there is still, they still post lots of examples. And so you could go to any one of those examples. If you go to the fellowships program, you can call up lots of different samples and see how different people talk about their applications, and specifics that they use. but they would use things like, when I talk about my own work, I work on a lot of work on the periodical press. And so I might talk about that a lot of people have worked on the periodical press. And they've looked at it in various ways. And in particular, I work on the religious periodical press. And so they've done a lot of different things. And Joanne Shattuck has worked on certain things, and Richard Altick has written on things. And that will help me then carve out that little place. And I'll say, I want to expand the discussion, or I want to join the discussion in this gap where no one else has talked. No one has talked about this. No one's looked at what clergymen did day to day, to how they used periodicals to build their sermons, for example. So that might be one way of talking about significance, because I'm talking about that will help people in my area better understand the periodical press. But I might also say, there's also a lot of people who work on the history of religion, and that's a much bigger circle. And here's what they're talking about in the history of religion. And I actually plug in there too. I might even go one step further. I actually have talked on this topic for a group of clergy here in Alexandria, Virginia, where I live, who are still confronted with having to write many sermons every week. And so I tell them about how in the 19th century, they were drawing on this. So right there, I have 3 different ways of talking about significance by talking about 3 different audiences. So if I were writing a grant proposal about my project, those are 3 things that I would think about including. I might also look, I work with a group of periodicals that simply people don't know about. And so bringing those to light is really is part of my argument for significance as well. Does that help?
Yes, it does a lot, actually. It seems to me that you had talked about 2 of your points, educate and challenge. I think to do this for me anyway, not sure for the other people on the call, there needs to be education where you look at examples, as well as the challenge of generating a lot of ideas, thinking about the audiences, thinking about what are different perspectives that could show the importance or the significance of the project, and perhaps going to other people to say, can we think of anything else? Because it seems to me to be not an obvious thing. But yeah, but your explanation was very helpful to me. Thanks.
Great, Susan. You have my email, so if you want to continue this discussion, let me know. I'm going to, you're going to hear a little buzz as I raise my standing desk. I need to stand up here, so, okay. Next question, David. Or Ross, or Susan, or whoever wants to talk to me.
Sorry.
Well, actually, as you were talking about the 3 voices of significance, the 3 sides of the triangle really works there. If you were going to apply to maybe granted, you could speak to the fact that the significance of the project is the impact to PIs, scholars, and researchers, as well as the impact to sponsors and foundations that you connect with, and the foundational impact at the institutions or universities.
That's spot on. That is spot on. You can have, there are all of these, it's also, I think, important, and it's probably not that natural for me, simply because I almost always, when I apply for grants, I'm applying for myself. but think about what this is going to mean for your institution. It might well be that you have an impact on the funders as well. And so I like, I love that. You probably drew that out for me as a throwaway the other day, Sandy, but it's probably one of the most impactful little moments that I've had in the past year, sort of just chewing at me and thinking about. So anyway.
I'm glad that can inspire you. You inspire me too. And as you said in the very beginning, the title of your talk is Research That Matters. And this is what we're talking about. Is it important? Is it significant? And although it's important to us because it's our area of scholarship, it's what we want to do, is it important to the peer review panel? Is it important to the program manager that will make the funding decision? How can we make sure that our significance can be their significance so that we get not just a peer reviewer, but a champion for the project?
Is that a question for me?
You asked for a question, you got it.
Yeah.
How can I make a champion for my project?
It's I think I said early on, a lot of really good projects simply go unfunded because we don't provide them, or we don't construct a good application. And so, a lot of times, every year when the Pulitzers are announced, I look at that list and I'll say, oh, I hope I say, look, we funded the winner. But just as often at NEH, I would say, oh, look, we didn't fund the winner. And we did a little sort of staff panel once where we went back and we looked at a lot of those applications, a lot of those projects that didn't get funded that were Pulitzers. And it was just a matter of the applications were not well written. It's important, and here let me talk a little bit about the ACLS to go back to this, because this is related. It's important to know how or who's going to be reading your application. And so at ACLS, they put a premium on people outside your area reading your application. So if I applied, I would go through a two-stage process. The first stage would be people who are probably interested in Victorian studies or literature, at least. And that would then, if I made it through that process, I would then be randomly assigned to 5 people. And they might be literature people, they might not be literature people, they might and so you have to know how you can talk, how you have to make sure that you are communicating the importance of your project to people who are outside your area. And that is something that we don't always do well. It's really easy, like in my project, to look and say, well, it's, dead white men of privilege that I'm looking at primarily. So I've got a big task in front of me. How do I make that important to someone who isn't interested in that? And that's a big lift. but it is a doable one and one that you have to do if you like it or not, if you want to be funded. And so it's, yeah, that's I guess where I'll leave it. That's how ACLS works. NEH works kind of the same way. It's also a two-tier process, but it is your sort of sub-discipline, and then it is a sort of a related area of discipline. So if I might be read by Victorianists, and then I might be read by British literature generally in my area. So it's more disciplinary, more discipline based than ACLS, for example. And so that's why it's so important that you build that relationship with with the people who are sponsoring these grant competitions, so you understand how they do their business. It helps you understand who you write for. And it also means you probably shouldn't recycle your applications. So at NEH, we would often get applications where people would forget to change the wording in the application. They would say, I'm hoping to be funded by ACLS for blah, blah, blah. And it would cause all sorts of confusion with our panelists, and eventually would realize, oh, they must have submitted this to ACLS. But that's a mistake, because you're talking to two different kinds of audiences. You need, I should say that at least at one point, NEH and ACLS and a number of other grant agencies or grant programs in the humanities were looking to come up with kind of a universal application, so that we could more easily, or grantees could more easily navigate among us. And I don't know if that will continue in the new administration or not. Right now, I think it's kind of dead in the water, but hopefully that won't last. That will be picked up at some point. And yeah.
Thank you, Russ. Dave?
Yeah, so Russ, based on your observation that the current lack of funding situation is not sustainable, and that there'll be a swing back, but it won't go all the way back. The question is, a couple of people have asked this: what do you anticipate the landscape will look like, and how will that affect not just funding here, but for other countries?
For other countries. That's the other countries bit I'm going to write down just so I don't forget it.
Well, and countries of concern as well.
Yeah. So what do I think is going to happen? I don't think it's quite sorted itself out. I do think NEH on January 20th, I think had 60 grant lines, 60 grant lines. I don't see us, I think everyone agreed we had grown too much, in that we had created too many grant lines. And every time you create a new grant line, you need more staff. It's more difficult. We were looking very closely, even before January 20th, at the NSF model of doing things, so that we could, I think what we will see will be sort of more flexible programs where several different types of research, for example, could go into one opportunity, could fall under one opportunity. And I think that's, I think that's where we will go. And if I ever had a chance to sort of advise people, that's where I think I would encourage, simply because it makes a more efficient use of staff. But it also opens up the number of opportunities. I would hope too that NEH would think more systematically than it had about underserved underserved audiences, frankly. I really would have liked, I was excited by the opportunity that we were looking and we were talking with NSF at, we all had the same challenges of trying to reach out to HBCUs or primarily teaching institutions, because we knew there were people at those institutions that were very much engaged in research, and how do we reach out to those people who might not have the infrastructure and the capacity at their institution. I would expect NEH would think more systematically about those things. We were kind of playing catch up with a lot of our granting institutions, the grant institutions that we worked with. I would think you would also see more collaboration among agencies. So more IMLS and NEH had programs that were very, very similar to each other. NEA and NEH had programs that were very similar to each other, translation programs, for example, where we could have easily combined efforts and had a greater impact had we done that. And so I think we all recognize that, and we were working there, but we were doing it perhaps taking too much time. And I think there will be a lot of interest in sort of pushing this. One of the things NEH has done in the last few years, and again, it's continuing some of the efforts now, is work with other countries, and that has come up, international work. Just a reminder, NEH funds people who are US citizens or who have been residents in the US for the last 7 years, are eligible. But it's difficult, especially in the government, to directly fund collaborators who are not at US institutions. And so you have to find clever ways to do it through some contracts, perhaps subcontracts to the individuals rather than to institutions, or working with our counterparts around the world. The hard part here for NEH is that around the world, most of our counterparts are kind of a combination of NEH and NSF and IMLS. They're kind of all rolled into one. It's a different kind of organizational structure. The US is unique in having a humanities agency and a science-only agency. So it's always this kind of delicate dance that we're doing. But we were finding new ways to fund collaborations around the world. There are some of these still in place at NEH, I think with Germany and with Greece. There was one going to be launched with the UK. I don't know if that's happening or not. And Israel and a number of organizations.
Great answer, thank you.
Thanks very much. So now, Roy would like to know, in your early days of applying for grant funding, what were your biggest fears
In my early days,
in your early days?
We're seeing him relive the trial live on the screen here.
Poor Russ.
you know, I came, I came out of very much of a working class background. I went to institutions that I wouldn't call them working class, but they were not elite institutions. And so I was always worried that those would be the institutions that, got left behind. And of course, NEH has always been merit-based. So we're looking for the best projects, which means we're looking for the best applications. There was nothing you could do if there was a lousy application from a really interesting, out of the way kind of place. There was nothing you could do about that. But I wouldn't say it was a fear, but I was always sort of rooting for applications that came from those places. So personally, that is what I would say. I wouldn't say there's a fear. I'm not sure I really had fears until this past year. I would say, when grants.gov came along, I had a lot of fears. I actually went for a year and worked in the grants.gov office. And, it was in the very early years when, before they even used Adobe. I can't remember even the thing that was supposed to be the next big thing, which turned out to not be the next big thing, and that they embraced it, Lightstream or something like that. And there were lots of times when I thought the whole system was just going to collapse, because it didn't seem, but it always managed to sputter along. And well, now it's really sort of, I think, come into its own. But on those early days, I used to worry a lot about grants.gov and its ability to support the work that we were doing. But that has solved itself. I do worry about, the role of politics at NEH right now. That's something that really worries me. I was the head of the research division during the first Trump administration, and there was some of that. But nothing like, right now it's just consuming the entire, really the entire federal bureaucracy is, really consumed of what's going on. So I have a lot of fears there. But
Me too.
yeah.
Well, you dated yourself a little bit with the beginnings of Adobe, and I completely get it. I miss my BlackBerry still, but the idea that technology is changing so quickly and that we don't just have to write an outstanding, persuasive, compelling grant that's holistic and reads through as one story as you go from one element of the grant to the next. It still needs to be comprehensive. Okay, but there's more. You also have to navigate a system, not just any system, the system within your institution, the system within your sponsor, the federal system, and making sure that it gets all the way through. And then you get the joy of waiting up to 6 months for them to maybe tell you if you got funded.
I'm sorry, so what's the question and all of that?
No, she was making an observation.
Okay.
But I have a question.
I was waiting for the question.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'll build on that, navigating new interesting things here. So since you mentioned that AI is often discouraged in grant applications, what innovative approaches were you referring to that researchers can still use to leverage AI effectively in the humanities field?
So here are some clever things that I much appreciate. I was talking to someone, I think at a NORDA conference actually, and he was using the feedback that was provided by panelists, feeding that into ChatGPT and then saying, distill it for me, and was getting both for individuals a better sort of focused sort of sense of what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong. But then he was also looking more holistically at all of the applications they were putting in to see what could the organization be doing. Were there things that the organization was missing? Here's a place where it could have been useful. A person at, I'm going to say, I'll just tell you, it was at Marquette, which was my undergraduate institution, but so that makes it kind of like weird to talk about for me. But they were telling me once upon a time that they had, they were always getting turned down at NEH. And so this was before ChatGPT. So I started, when I went back to DC, I started to read applications from Marquette. And I realized that, that it came up over and over again that the application was too general, was generalized. And the variations on this complaint were coming up over and over again. And as we talked about it, it turned out that before you were allowed to submit an application to NEH, you went into sort of a pot with a whole bunch of other, with engineering and business and all of these other non-humanities. And so people, to get through this competition or internal process, were essentially dumbing down their applications to make sure that people understood. And they weren't then rewriting them before they went off to NEH, where they might be talking to people who maybe they weren't in their exact fields, but were familiar with literature or with history. And so this was like a aha moment that had we had AI back then, this would have been, I think, really much easier for them to see very much earlier on. And so this is one way. I also think things like work plan. I think you can use, various kinds of AI to help you think about work plan and generate work plans that are compelling. I would avoid, with the narrative. Obviously, I don't think that's a place for AI. But I do think that, but some things like in bibliographies and work plans, that's a very sort of promising area to use AI.
Okay, great. And so now, do you think that grant writing is more of a science or more of an art?
That's a great question. more of an art or more of a science?
I think it's more of a science.
I love that you didn't just initially answer it. You actually really thought about that.
No, I don't know, because as soon as it came out of my mouth, I said to myself, no, Russ, you're wrong. It's more of an art. So, I mean, the cop-out thing is to say, oh, well, it's a balance of the two. But no one wants to hear the cop-out answer. I do think that to be competitive, it's more of a science. The really best applications, I think, have the science part down. And the art becomes, you can tell the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, this is not, Sandy, what do you think? You have as much experience as I do, for goodness sake. Well, how would you,
Well, I refer to it as the art and architecture of a proposal and unpack the science of grant writing as well as speak to the salesmanship, because you have to pitch and be compelling and persuasive as well. You're marketing your idea. So I think it's all of those things. But if you do too much that's salesmanship and not enough science, like, oh no, where's your argument? Where's your evidence? If you put too much in the science and not enough in the art of developing a compelling proposal, then you run the risk of not being clear in what you're going to do or how you're going to do it. You need to really be logical of the methodology and the approach as well, which speaks to the architecture of your proposal. So it can't be any one thing. It has to be very well balanced.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that I think people, you will only achieve that balance by doing it again and again. It's I've talked a lot about there's a woman who I thought was had the gift of always sort of getting a grant at any age. And yet even but when you got talking to her, you realized she was putting in grants all the time to all sorts of different places, and she got turned down a lot. You always remember the ones that get funded, of course. But it's that doing it again and again and again, and learning how to get all of the structure right, and learning how to balance, because it always is, if you have 3 pages to write, you have to balance, what do I want to say here? What do I want to say there? What can I have my letter writers say? What, and learning how to balance all of these things. Also, but yeah, I think the more you do it, it becomes, that's the only way to really develop that. And that's
a good way to learn.
That's why it is so important that we start people when they're young in the humanities. I wish we did more in graduate education with grant writing. I know in the sciences they do more. And I wish we did more. I think the sciences have completely gotten it right. Because it teaches you how to talk about your project. And I think that's, so a lot of people, by the time they got their first job, you want them to have those skills already, but if they're developing them, they're going to get discouraged and they're not going to have time. They're just going to say, I don't have time for this anymore. And then they check out of the grants process. And that's not what we want. That's not where we want to be.
I appreciate your comment about the solitary genius, because there's so often times those scholars, those humanities scholars in history and philosophy that say, oh, Sandy, I don't need a grant. I got everything I need to do my research right here, right? But I'll just do it in the summer. Well, that's not how to advance the future of your field. You want a grant that's going to support your students, right? You're going to mentor and create, opportunities for research engagement as well. And I think that is one of the ways that NSF and NIH has gotten it right, is they really promote graduate research in their grants and supporting that.
Spot on, Sandy. And I would say, I would add on to that, when you're looking at humanities offerings, a lot of times people say, well, I don't want to ask for too much money. I'm more likely to get funded if I ask for less money. And you know what's usually the thing they cut out? Are the using graduate students, bringing in the next generation of scholar that gets moved out so quickly. And the funny thing is, like at NEH, and I know at other institutions as well, what we're doing is we're looking at the project. Does the project make sense? And if the project makes sense, then we'll fund it. We don't look at the amount of money until much later, when we've already made the decision, this is a project we'd like to fund. And so, don't try to cut money out and then cut out one of the really important things about funding, and that's funding the next generation.
Well, we've had all kinds of interesting comments and observations about AI after our last conversation. So that's all in the chat. The one specific question I have, though, is from Rangu, who wants to know, his observation is that AI is a tool that we can use for their works, such as Microsoft Teams, Zoom, or etc. So can you guide, is this something that can be used in all of those things, and then you can use this to generate your application?
Yeah, I think, I would be very hesitant to use it to generate a narrative of an application. I think that's a very difficult place to go. Most, I think, good grantors will give you sort of indications in their opportunity announcement of what they want. And then, of course, you're going to call them and talk to them to find out even more. And so I would be very hesitant to use AI there.
You want to talk about the difference
we do get, believe at NEH, we did not allow, we said that you could not use AI, things like GPT-2, to put together applications. But we would still get them. And we knew, because what they had done is clearly fed into the bot, the opportunity announcement and a whole bunch of other things. And so they would kind of throw our own language back at us in kind of a weird, awkward way, which just showed that they, and so we always, suspected that there was use of AI going on. We did declare at some point, declare an application ineligible because 3 applications, all from the same place, came with essentially the same work plan, and it was clear that they had used AI to generate the same work plan. So you've got to be smart about how you use it. that's the number one thing. And you've got to understand what the rules of the grantor's rules are regarding AI. But I think that they're all moving towards a place that's to allow more use of it. So you have to decide where can it do you the most good.
There's a big difference between generating your narrative with AI and editing and refining your narrative with AI.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're all using, and that's a funny thing, we're all using AI all the time. Even the people who complain bitterly about AI. They're using spell check. They're using, all of the suggestions. And so,
Well, we're gonna let Ron Wu talk to get further clarification. He's the one who had the question. Go ahead, Ron Wu.
Sorry, just for a general discussion about that. Yes, actually, before like 10 to 20 years ago, we are not familiar about using like Microsoft or Zoom or even Team. But now we are using more frequently all those platforms for our meeting, class, or something. Recently, actually, the OpenAI called ChatGPT that's launched for helping us. So I believe after 10 or 20 years later, this open source software, or you can say like OpenAI or something, that will be like backdated. And that time people usually use those things for their research, for their writing, or for their brainstorming or something. So my specific question actually to know when and how we can use those for our research development, brush up our proposal or something like that. Because when we think something and when we give our information to the ChatGPT, so ChatGPT share those information with other people when they're trying to write their similar types of things or similar types of idea. So ChatGPT instantly share with the other people. So it's very difficult. Currently, my new idea, my research idea will be novel because I shared my opinion, my research idea with ChatGPT, but some other people, when they're trying to do similar things, then ChatGPT share my idea with them. So in this situation, actually, it's very difficult to develop research idea or grant proposal or something. So in these scenarios, how can we use those, or is something we cannot do that?
You make excellent points. And I wish I was more proficient in AI so that I could answer you more completely. The rule of thumb that I always use for myself is if I would feel awkward about telling someone looking at what I've written that it's gone through ChatGPT or some other kind of AI, if I would feel awkward about it, then I shouldn't be doing it. I really do think we need to find a way in the humanities to say, I've used it here. And so it's clear what we are crediting to AI and what we're not crediting to AI. I don't know, that probably doesn't answer your question. But I always, like I say, I don't use it a lot. fact, I don't use it very much, and you can probably tell by sort of the discombobulated nature of my thoughts. That I'm not using it a lot. I probably would benefit from it. But if I were to come to you and say, I've used ChatGPT to put together my presentation today, I think that I would feel embarrassed about that. And so I don't do it.
And another thing, like for example, we are working together like a big collaborative team. So our initial draft it show us like a lot of error, language barriers, lack of like novelty of the research project or something. At the end, we we revise it again and again, and then at the end we will get a very solid structured sentence proposal. But when like our initial first draft with like broken language or unstructured sentence, when we get help from ChatGPT, it instantly give us a very nice, well structured sentence, well writing proposal. So actually, ChatGPT help us for doing those things. But the other issue is when we share our idea with ChatGPT, the ChatGPT will share with others people.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I would be very hesitant, honestly, to do that with my own work before I've published.
but
I know.
but we use this for
I
our
know.
for our for our development, for our like oil brush up sentence or structured documents. So in this situation, what is the solution?
So there's something called a closed AI system and an open AI system.
Yeah.
Open AI is ChatGPT when you just go on the internet and you put in there, and anything you put in there is their property. Essentially, they can do what they want with it. A closed AI system, and we have one of these at USF, many institutions do, is a system that has been trained and is no longer continuing to train, where it is safe to put IP in there and know that it's not going anywhere outside of your institution. So that's what you want to look for when you start considering what tools to use in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, and we are 10 minutes after 5.
And
This has
caught
been
up
a
on
rousing
questions.
discussion. Oh, do we have more questions?
No, we're caught up.
Oh, excellent, excellent, excellent.
I just have to say, I'm looking at the questions, and Kendra, great job with the British Bake Off
Don't you
reference.
love that?
I'll take that as a win.
Go ahead, Kendra.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
I think the Great British Bake Off is like it's the perfect, I tell all my faculty, if you want to understand how to write a proposal well, you need to watch an episode of the Great British Bake Off, because you get the combination of the technical challenge, which is the architecture where you have to get it exactly right and you have to finish on time, and you have the ingredients that you're given and you must follow the instructions. And then you have like the artistic challenge where you've got to show innovation, and at the end it's got to look good. It can't be like a messy pile. And I'm just like that. I never knew that that proposal writing and Great British Bake Off were so closely aligned, but I think
It is the perfect analogy.
That's brilliant, Kendra. Thank you for that. And I will, you've probably, I don't want to say you've ruined the British Bake Off for me, but I will never watch it in the same way again.
Totally. And then like when you then I'm like, the goal is to get a Paul Hollywood handshake. Like that's the goal of so when people will like turn stuff into me, I'll be like, so do you think this is Paul Hollywood handshake worthy? Tell me why.
And no soggy bottoms. You can never have a
Right.
soggy bottom, Kendra.
Bravo.
Not claggy. You can't have it. It can't be claggy.
That's
I
awesome.
think that about wraps us up for today, Russ.
On that note,
On that note,
thank you all.
Indeed. And this is our last workshop. Sandy, you want to have any closing words or anything?
How sweet it is. This has been wonderful. Best workshop series ever. Great speakers, great participants. Love seeing all of the assignments. You guys do all the right things. I hope you enjoy the training activities guidebook and that you continue to write and write and write. Read proposals, be able to throw rocks at them and say, I could have written a proposal better than that. Well, show me. Write a proposal better than that. And keep doing it. 100% of the grants not submitted are unfunded, I promise. So submit, show demand for these programs, and build relationships with your program officers. With that, have a great weekend. We're out. Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Russ.
Thank you, Russ.